Few games have the morbid allure and surrounding mythology that Sad Satan does. And it's for good reason. A little while ago I made a video exploring a few different versions of the infamous dark web game, and some of the versions I covered were heavily sterilized of the more grim content, and others not so much. And in that video, I mentioned that there was a version of Sad Satan coming to Steam. Now, if you're not familiar with Sad Satan and its reputation, you might not know why this is an insane thing to imagine. Sad Satan is known for, and almost entirely relies on, disturbing imagery, real gore content, and other even worse things which I don't think I should even mention here. But most pressingly, and most disturbingly for Steam, several versions of Sad Satan contain copyrighted music, and that's simply not on. And yet, here it is. Sad Satan on Steam. Your soul for £4.99. Let's take a look. Unfortunately, I wasn't recording for this, but upon initially launching it, Steam gave me two options in a little menu like this. The options were play Sad Satan or play Sad Satan, and neither button actually worked. They put the executable in an incorrectly named folder, but that's fine. That just makes the game more esoteric. It adds a little bit of the mystery from the older versions. Of course, I'm being ridiculous. They fucked up at the first hurdle. I didn't even know Steam let that happen, but here we are. Anyway, manually finding the files and launching the game there, it starts as intended, and immediately we get the reversed Hong Kong 97 music. That's something of a trope among Sad Satan clones, as is having a deeply unimpressive main menu. But a new quality can be found here compared to the others. Having the loudest menu buttons known to man, other than maybe Cry of Fear. And talking about the main menu, we can notice something strange. The game is listed as Sad Satan Nightmare. If we look back to the screenshot I put in my other Sad Satan video, we can see that this has not always been the case, at least according to the Steam page. We can also see that the publisher was once listed as Obscure Horror Corner, which was the name of the YouTube channel responsible for the original footage that gave way to the Sad Satan legend. But now it's been changed to ZK Loper as both developer and publisher. ZK was the name of the alleged developer of the original Sad Satan game, who, according to the various lores surrounding this game, is either a dark web denizen who is in prison for unspeakable crimes that may or may not be related to the horrible content in the game, or Obscure Horror Corner himself under a vague, untraceable pseudonym. If that second case is the right one, it makes sense as to why the publisher on Steam was changed, because, well, you kind of blew your cover there a little bit. But I can confidently say that this is absolutely not from the original developer of Sad Satan. This ZK is an entirely different person altogether, and I'll talk more about why I know that later on. But the biggest shock comes when you start the game and see a 0 out of 8 counter in the top right of the screen. This is one of those increasingly prevalent things that will age you as a horror fan. If you don't know why this counter is a worrying sign, let me know in the comments. Make me feel old. The second thing you see is the walking cycle. Oh my god, you're the bounciest, stompiest guy around. No wonder Satan is sad. Poor bastard can't get a wink of sleep. Well, it's either the stomping keeping him awake, or potentially the endless screaming, as is tradition in any Sad Satan clone. I recognize some of the screams that play from the other games, but there's one in there that is very distinctly the scream used in those Mr. Incredible becoming uncanny memes. In fact, the entire audio cacophony sounds like you're speedrunning Gmod horror maps while rapidly scrolling through the horror tag on TikTok. Annoyingly, there's been one major addition to the Sad Satan formula which targets me specifically. They added ceilings. I can no longer break out of bounds. The shrieking creature girl is still there, but she now sprints off or disappears when you get too close, so you can no longer Goomba stomp her to the top of the leaderboards. But other than that, things are pretty similar to the originals. The images that pop up on screen are the same as in the old versions, but positioned and scaled in nearly the exact same way that I put images on screen in my videos. You know you've made some curious decisions in life when Sad Satan Nightmare is what makes you take a long, hard look in the mirror. And you know you're truly fucked when that doesn't make you change anything. After running around for a while at the most painfully slow pace, I found a TV. It's got the vibe of the kind of TV they roll into classrooms to show you episodes of Brainiac or Bill Nye the Science Guy when the teacher is hungover, except here it shows horror YouTuber B-roll. But if you watch it for long enough, shit gets really weird.
Number 14. This creepy night witch has never once left her shack.
But watching all of that miscellaneously creepy archive footage made me realize something about this game. There are no video filters. No static overlays or contrast fuckery, nothing at all. And that is one of the easiest things to replicate from the original Sad Satan games. Hell, in my last video on it, I even showed just how easy it is to implement. If you've watched the channel for a while, you'll know that I'm not usually into crazy screen filters or effects for their own sake, but it just doesn't feel like Sad Satan if it's not the visual equivalent of a migraine. That's a peculiar thing to skip over. Talking about things that were missed out on, I was looking away from the screen for a moment and got Gmod horror map jump scared. And I totally missed it. But not to worry, I learned that the game does not limit the number of times a scare can trigger. Good heavens. Now, the reason I was looking away from the screen and missed that jump scare originally is because I was fucking bored out of my skull. The entirety of the game is loud noises and slow movement in a map that is leagues bigger than it has any right to be. You gotta hand it to the older Sad Satans. They had the decency to split the game up into smaller and more manageable loading zones. But anyway, you may notice that I've been playing for a while, and I am yet to pick up any of the 8 pages, or whatever the fuck it was Satan left lying around. Eventually I do stumble across one, which was truly an elusive target because the game tells you very little about your goal in the main body of the game itself. You have to click a button in the main menu for that, and as I previously stated, I was a little distracted by the 300 decibel vine boom to notice. Initially I thought you had to pick up the crosses on the walls, but there are entirely too many for that. Then I thought it was the TVs or off-brand disc plates, but it wasn't them either. Turns out, what you actually have to find are badly mistextured books. If I had been a bit more astute, I would have realized that the store page itself also says, indent, comma, space, you must collect all 8 books. And no, I don't know why it's formatted like this. Similar to the main menu, I don't blame myself too much for not paying much attention here because it also says that there are complex puzzles to solve. This is not true. But to be fair, it also says, prepare to dive into a world of horror and face the Satans within you. Which is... hell yeah, brother. Anyway, the books you need to find are ones like this King James book. Presumably the Bible, but it could be any number of his works. Oh. Hello, Satan. You alright? Hello folks, I don't usually do this kind of thing, but here's a self-shilling break because I have a fun thing to share. All this talk about Sad Satan and dark web stuff got me re-interested in a game series I've yet to play, but I've seen a fair amount of online. The Welcome to the Game series, where you browse the deep web while trying not to get caught by villains and such. I'll be streaming them on my Twitch sometime soon, so come and join me at twitch.tv/Painticus. Currently I stream on Mondays and Fridays, but my schedule shifts around a bit every so often, so I'll keep you guys updated. And if you miss the streams, don't worry, they'll be on my archive channel for you to watch later on. And while I'm shilling, check out the Patreon. There's some stuff on there. Any support is hugely appreciated. Fuck, I hate self-promotion. Our old friend Charles Manson comes back doing his whole Joe Rogan experience thing, and we even get a little bit of his audio reversed, so that's neat. You know, reversing an audio automatically makes it scarier. Finally, we find something actually pretty scary. The Doors room. As in, the room where they play a slowed plus reverb version of the Doors' Alabama song that sounds something like this. It's such a needlessly edited song because the unedited version is unsettling in its own way, but I guess this gets around copyright flagging systems, potentially, which is a hilarious thing to think about because it really puts things in perspective. People tend to build so much of an aura around deep web media. It's often framed as being outside of the law or above standard rules, but a single copyright strike could annihilate most instances the second they attempted to reach the mainstream surface web. They're not hidden away because they're exclusive and only for the most intrepid explorers. They're hidden because they're afraid. Satan is sad, for not even he can defeat Content ID. Anyway, the Doors room is also the room where you finish the game if you get all 8 books. There's also a picture on the wall here that seems to have a video playback bar on it. It's been distorted a little bit, but I think this is a screenshot from a video. But then I noticed that loads of the images have this, so it can't be that. It's just an utterly perplexing overlay they slapped on top of existing images. This is a good example of when adding detail makes something look even lower effort. Either that or all of these images were screenshot from the same video. In the doors room, I find some Cyrillic text on these big stone slabs. Any Cyrillic language readers, please do tell me what this says. Unless, of course, it's the intellectual property of the doors, then keep it to yourself if you know what's good for you. While looking around this enormous labyrinth for some very small books, I came across a picture of JFK, and that's nothing too noteworthy. There are loads of pictures across all Sad Satan variants of various historical figures who are either evil or got eviled, sometimes both. But it reminded me of something wonderful. I recently played the Black Ops campaign through again, shortly after my Still Wakes the Deep video, and I completely forgot that it's implied that the player character fucking shot JFK and forgot about it. That's incredible. Every game should end in that exact way. It took me forever to find the 8th and final entry in the scary book collection, but when I did, I unlocked the doors door. And then, unsurprisingly, I get the end.jpg image which doesn't even fully cover the screen. And I can still stomp around loudly while it's up there. And there we have it. Sad Satan, remastered for a modern audience. Or is it? Because I had a look around, and I think I stumbled upon what this game actually is. Because I had suspicions that it wasn't just a remake, because basically every playable version of Sad Satan is a remake of Obscure Horror Corner's one to begin with. And they're all very similar, but not this one. This one is quite different. And here's why. This is actually a PC port of a mobile game called Sad Satan, first listed as far back as 2022 by a, and I quote, ZK Loper. Not ZK Loper, Zekloper. So this version of the game is a cash-in PC port of a cash-in mobile remake of a free game that sucked to begin with. And the reason it's so different both visually and in terms of layout is because the Terror engine that the others were made on is not available for mobile from what I can tell. Which means the developer presumably built the game from the ground up in Unity, which, to give them credit, is substantially more effort than most other Sad Satan developers were willing to put in. But that's not to say that the effort is particularly great. This is best characterized with the patch notes on the Amazon App Store for the mobile game, where it says things such as, new ending, butter quality. In fact, the Steam update notes are quite similar in quality and proofreading prowess, e.g. fixed some issues. And overall, this game has had some of the most changes and updates I've ever seen for an indie horror game, with most of them being edits to the Steam page rather than changes to the game itself. And with most of them being hilarious. And annoyingly, just a few days before finishing the script, the game updated again. Properly, this time with actual content updates, including adding a map, which is a genuinely huge change. And that is accurately noted in the patch notes when it is labeled as Big Update. The map trivializes the game, which is actually an upgrade, and another great thing about the update is that it lets you turn off the horrible screams and other stock sound effects. So, in other words, it removes 90% of the game's identity and makes it 90% more tolerable. They also fixed the pop-up image scaling so it no longer looks like the images I put up in my videos, and, you know, it's not a good look for me if the Sad Satan Nightmare developer thought that something I do frequently in my videos was so bad it needed to be fixed in their game's big update. But perplexingly, one of the big changes they made was removing the ghost girl. What the fuck, man? She was the only vaguely interesting part of the game. But other than that, I'll give them credit. The big update does make the game better. Bigly. However, there's an important distinction to make here, and an important life lesson for you all to keep in mind. Better does not always mean good. Sometimes it just means less bad. For example, my 2015 review of Amnesia: Machine for Pigs is much better than my 2016 review of World of Warcraft, but preferably, I'd have neither. Thankfully, I've done a lot of growing since then and my horizons have broadened. Things are much better now. And that is to say, Sad Satan on Steam, despite its improvement, is still bad. And yet, despite that, people like me buy it. And so have some others, so let's take a look at their reviews. Save your money! I knew I shouldn't expect this to hit as hard as the OG given it's available on Steam, but there was nothing disturbing about this. Just annoying. And how on earth can a $13 list price be justified? There are thousands of free games on itch 100 times better than this. Seriously, shameless. And if you decide not to heed my warning, just be careful with the controls. Twice I accidentally tapped Q and it took me back to the main menu, losing all progress. How can a game with almost no controls get them so wrong? $13, ha, ha, ha. It's important to note that the game is no longer $13, so this review was a force for good. I think someone would have to try really hard to make a game worse than what we have right here. This is as bad as it gets, people. There is really no excuse for making a game this bad, and to charge $13 for it means a hard slap to the face is well deserved. Note, this developer is purposefully trying to deceive the customer by putting reviews 8.0 from IMDb on his store page. That is the IMDb score for a 2018 movie called Sad Satan, and is certainly not a score based on this trash game right here. This quote means that the developer is knowingly trying to tell a bold-faced lie to desperately try and get your money. Not recommended. Not sure if the original game files are still downloadable somewhere online, but I've had it lying on my hard drive for years, and this is nothing like the OG. I feel stupid to have been so excited about a remake. Even if you don't have any expectations, this is still worse. Crikey. Usually, I don't like mocking or otherwise hating on small games, especially ones that seem to be developed by a single person. Game development is hard, and even the most flawed projects are usually worthy of some level of praise if you look hard enough. Like, I can genuinely say that the dev is making good steps towards improving this, and praise like that is not something to overlook or dismiss. But I'm more than happy to shit on this project for one main reason. The source material. If this was based on almost anything else, I almost certainly wouldn't be as hard on it, because most source materials are not directly linked to images of child exploitation, gore, and real-life crimes. Why you would want your indie project to be associated with these things is unknown to me, unless you were wanting to profit off of the shock factor of the original content and the morbid mystique that the name carries, which I think is exactly what's going on here. And even if it wasn't a cash grab project based on a larger existing IP, it still has another major failure: scope. When we think about a game project's scope, we often think about mechanics, or setting, or literal game size and length. For example, we can see any number of Kickstarter or Indiegogo funded studios that have attempted large-scale RPGs or MMOs, and you can clearly see why they failed. They were creating, or intending to create, well beyond their technical and financial means. But scope also applies to concept. Sometimes an idea is too big or too complex outside of anything technical, and it's more common than you might think. Look at something like Metal Gear Survive. Konami absolutely had the technical ability to make a zombie survival crafting multiplayer stealth action game, and they did. But the reason it was hated rather than just forgotten or considered very middling was because of the concept. They never had the creative ability to make the Metal Gear series fit around a multiplayer zombie survival game. That was a gargantuan task that basically nobody would have succeeded at. But it's not necessarily a flawed concept. It's just an incredibly difficult one to get right. It was out of Konami's creative scope. The reason we don't often view conceptual scope as that big of an issue is because it's not measured in the same way as technical scope. Technical scope is easy. You either can or you can't do something. It's as simple as that. With conceptual scope, it's not can or can't. You can always materialize a concept in one way or another. It's just a matter of if you should or you shouldn't, and that can be much harder to tell. Questions like, am I able to execute this concept tastefully, should be asked if there's any kind of controversy or sensitivity surrounding it, which is a major issue in a lot of media that covers topics like sexual assault, which often end up being shock value, fetish material, or just terrible attempts at edgy comedy. And then there are other questions like, can this live up to the expectations surrounding this concept? Which should have been popped up with the likes of Metal Gear Survive and Fallout 76, which infuriated fans of both franchises and led to a lot of lost faith in the development studios. Yeah, I know Fallout 76 is better now, but don't act like the first act of that game's life wasn't one of the biggest shit shows in gaming history. And there are dozens of other questions which we need to ask ourselves before attempting to build something around an idea that might be really bad. For example, should I, as a sole developer with little experience, loosely adapt one of the most infamous and controversial games ever made while calling my vague reimagining an enhanced version of the originals, which, by the way, were known for their extreme and illegal content, and then release this reimagining on Steam under the name of the original creator of said games who is implied to be a predator? Well, someone said yes to that.